Risings, family and friends. I pray that you can hear me okay. We got me kind of mic'd up a little differently than when we normally come on this platform. So Together We Can family. It's great to see you guys. I know it's been a while since the last time we dropped in and had a conversation, but I felt like it was about time. I see my lovely wife is already in the digital space. So I want to invite everybody to come in. Listen, like, love, tag, share, invite, subscribe, do all of those good things. If you like the type of information, the type of content that we typically bring, make sure to hit that bell so that you can always get the notice of when we're going live. We're actually inviting you into something a little different today. Of course, today is Juneteenth. This is the first time in the United States history that it's celebrated as a federal holiday, or as you might say, a national holiday. So it's kind of a big deal. And for those of you who have been a little closer to me or have followed me a little bit, you already know I have some rather strong opinions about Juneteenth and July 4th and those things. So tonight, what I would like to do very briefly is just have a discussion with you. And I want to invite you to participate in that discussion however you see fit. We grown folks here, so we're going to have a grown folks dialogue. I pray you guys are okay with that. At the same time, I am here with my family. My kids are in here. My wife, she's somewhere in here. I know it looks like I'm at an auditorium somewhere, but this is just a curtain. This is the living room, and we're inviting you in the living room. Kids, would y'all say hello? Hello. So you can hear the kids. So what we're doing is every time there's a major holiday that impacts African Americans or Black people or Indigenous people, we as a family try to have a discussion about it or do something around it while building a sense of tradition for ourselves. Something that my wife and I, whom you've all met, deem absolutely important and critical. So this tonight, we're going to have our Juneteenth conversation with you. So I'm going to kind of be giving a lecture to my children. We have four of those. We got four Martin kids in here. So I'm going to be giving a lecture to my children. And of course, my wife has heard all of this because her and I always talk about these things. And at the same time, I would like to kind of invite you guys in on this discussion. So the topic tonight, what we're discussing, family, is Juneteenth, Black Wall Street, and Malcolm X. And when you see those three things together, I know they probably don't immediately jump out to you as having something in common other than they all directly impact Black folk. But there's something else that these three things have in common. In particular, the way we perceive their narratives. And that's really what I want to talk about tonight. All right, so let's start off with Juneteenth. First of all, happy Juneteenth. Royal Rising, look, happy however you do it. In spite of anything you hear me say after this moment, I am never against any opportunity for Black people to come together and have a good time. I just pray that that never be all that we do, right? So there you go. You got your happy Juneteenth in there. Now let's kind of critically engage this conversation about what Juneteenth is. So we're going to back up a little bit. Juneteenth, we know, is a celebration of an event, or rather, a better word for it is commemoration. It's the commemoration of an event that we know that happened in 1865. But the basis of this event is a more historical event that takes place in 1863. And that event, or actually it takes place in 1862, it's supposed to take effect in 1863, and that is the Emancipation Proclamation. All right. Everybody out there, family, friends, whoever you is, I'm sure you've heard of the Emancipation Proclamation. But if you would kind of, just kind of pretend with me for a moment that maybe you don't, and let me give you a little bit of information about the Emancipation Proclamation. All right. What we know of it as is a document that was signed and put into law, if you will, by President who? Who knows? Abraham Lincoln. That's right. Abraham Lincoln. For the longest time before Bill Clinton, Abraham Lincoln was Black folks' favorite president. And then Bill Clinton was Black folks' favorite president, and now Barack Obama black folks' favorite president. So we got a long line of favorites there, or a growing line of favorites. But Abraham Lincoln gets this popularity among African Americans, particularly because of the Emancipation Proclamation and what we know about it, right? So it's not just because of the Emancipation Proclamation, because that's a historical reality. And that's an important distinction to make. The fact that the Emancipation Proclamation exists is a historical reality. What we understand about it may not be. All right, can I make that make sense? All right, so the document exists, the statement exists, the consequences exist, they're all there. But what we tend to think about the Emancipation Proclamation is actually not what the Emancipation was. For example, when we talk about the Emancipation Proclamation at Black History programs, and as many people did today, hopefully if you had a talking segment, an informational segment of your Juneteenth celebrations, if you had that, hopefully you talked about the Emancipation Proclamation. You probably said it was a document that freed all the slaves in the United States. That would be incorrect. That would be factually, not based off of any opinions. That would be factually incorrect, which is why I'm going to give a big shout out to the Danzies, who has the Danzies African Goods Store. They have a shirt commemorating Juneteenth, and it says, watch this, family, free-ish. All right? Y'all know the show Black-ish, right? This is free-ish. So, I mean, we free, but we still got some work to do. So I really love that because that better depicts what Juneteenth is. All right. So now we got the fact that the Emancipation Proclamation, we believe, let's kind of do some myth busting here. We believe the Emancipation Proclamation was a document that set all slaves free. No, it's a very short proclamation. So anybody with good internet access can go ahead and read the document for yourselves. It only set those slaves free who were in states that were in active rebellion, all right? Which meant that those slaves who were in border states and the slaves that we like to pretend do not exist in New England, all right? Because we have this imagery of the Underground Railroad only going north. So because of that, remember, there are some historical facts here, but we have some misperceptions in our understanding. So we have this understanding that there was no slavery practice in the North, and that's just not true. So, all right, so we're starting there. So the first thing is this Emancipation Proclamation did not set all slaves free. All right, that's very important. As a matter of fact, it only set the slaves free who were in a part of the United States that Abraham Lincoln had absolutely no authority over. In the states that he had authority over, he made no such law as it pertains to the emancipation. That law came later when Congress passed what we all know as the 13th Amendment. And before we get too praise happy about the 13th Amendment, let's not forget that Michelle Alexander just did an incredible documentary called The 13th Amendment, talking about the new Jim Crow. Now, what's amazing about that is that the 13th Amendment is called the new Jim Crow, but it's so important to understand that Jim Crow comes after the 13th Amendment, not before. So the 13th Amendment would not be the new Jim Crow, Michelle Alexander. It would be the original Jim Crow. God, that was good. If I was in a church, they'd be going crazy right now. No, the 13th Amendment is not the new Jim Crow. It was the original Jim Crow. All right? So that's a whole other situation. So, Emancipation Proclamation, January 1st, 1863. For those of us who have taken on the mantle of Juneteenth as if we have forgotten the history of Watch Night. All right? Because remember, Juneteenth actually only applies to one state, Texas. Texas. Everybody didn't have to wait to Texas. And the waiting game wasn't by state. Because I was just reading about the last slave ship which came into the Americas, or to say it appropriately, the last slave ship. What's going on, brother? The last slave ship to come into the last known slave ship to come into the Americas came, watch this, in 1860. This is 3 years before the Emancipation Proclamation. All right. So these things are important because these people who then come on this last known slave ship, they keep their history, they keep their heritage. They don't get free in Mobile, Alabama until 1865. Okay, but now we got to go back and explore the intentions of the emancipation, because remember, I told you the proclamation only applies to the states in which Abraham Lincoln has absolutely no presidential authority over, which means there's only one group of people that are actually going to honor this proclamation. Who? Those hopeless slaves who are hoping for a way out, which is precisely the reason. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. This is strategy. He used a strategy. He said, if we want to get these states back in line, they don't want to be a part of the Union, but those black folk in there don't want to be slaves no more either. So if we can convince those slaves, because it's not unconditional emancipation, it's not just cross the line and everything is okay. It is cross the line and put a gun in your hand and go right back over there and handle them for us. After all, you're really doing this for you. All right. So these things have to be understood. So Watch Night actually comes before Juneteenth. Watch Night is when black folk gathered after hearing the news of the emancipation, knowing that it would go into effect on January the 1st, December the 31st. And this is so important because many times we will try to cancel out the church's relevance when the church has actually done a phenomenal job with preserving much of our history. We have just done an inept job of caring about it. So the church has carried it down. Black churches still do Watch Night service. They may not know why anymore. Now they do it to declare the new word of the Lord for the year. As if God is so small that he has a different move for 2020 than 2021. Yeah, that's a whole nother other situation. All right, so Watch Night is our first official, what you would think is Juneteenth. It's our first free-ish moment, right? But then that free-ish moment don't come for everybody, not immediately. So what we're talking about on Juneteenth is not even a delayed freedom, but it's a delayed free-ish status, right? All right, so now, this is what Juneteenth is. The slaves in Texas did not get the news, or Texas didn't get the news. Texas had the news, but the army didn't arrive in Texas until June of 1865, and this is when they were able to officially put down slavery in Texas. All right, now, the official abolishment of slavery does not happen that day. Texas is not the last state holding slaves at this moment. At that moment, there are still slaves being held in Louisiana. There are still slaves being held in Maine. Oh, and there's something even more important. Did I keep it pulled up? I wish I did. I think I did. It's right here. Y'all give me a little time just to go up a little bit here, because I believe I need to get in the right time zone. But you have in the 1900s, see, this is when we're talking about slavery in the U.S., sometimes we forget that the U.S. is larger than the continental U.S. So one of these places that has been under U.S.'s jurisdiction for a while is Guam, which is in the Polynesian, Micronesian area. Anytime you hear Polynesian, Micronesian, you might as well hear Melanesian, because that's what that is. When you hear Melanesian, just hear melanin. So black folk. All right, so in Guam, slavery isn't abolished until February 22nd, 1900. Wait a minute, 1865 to 1900 is a long time. And if we're talking about American history, and if we're talking about Juneteenth, we're talking about an event that specifically impacts United States of America's history. Then America cannot say that it ended slavery in June 19th of 1865 if that freedom doesn't extend to all places where it holds jurisdiction until 1900. My concern is not that we shun away from celebrating. My concern is that we don't so quickly accept another false narrative, that we get ourselves completely rooted in the truth, that in all of our getting, we get understanding. I pray that somebody understands what a brother is saying, right? Okay, so Emancipation Proclamation does not apply to all black folk, just the black folk who Lincoln has absolutely no power over. This is his way of getting them on his side, right? To fight from the inside. Even when this happens, even when this ploy is successful, it still takes years. It still takes time for this actual for the actual abolishment of slavery to dissipate. There's one more that I want to hit, because I hit Guam in 1900, but there's another one, because even when we think about the United States of America, we often forget about the civilized tribes. So in 1866 is when slavery is abolished. The U.S. government makes treaties with the 5 civilized tribes in the Indian Territory, specifically Cherokee Nation, Choctaw Nation, Chickasaw Nation, Muskogee Nation, and the Seminole Nation. These are the 5 civilized tribes. Slavery does not end there for black folk until 1866. So again, my concern is not that we not have something to celebrate, but here's the thing. If the one thing that we're all willing to agree on is that the problem has been miseducation. The problem has been, this is how we like to say it, we like to say they hid our history from us. All right? But when you actually become a student, you understand that nobody can hide anything from you. Knowledge is available to everybody. You know, even the Bible says, let anybody who lacks wisdom ask of God, who gives it freely to everybody and chastises not. It says you don't have because you don't ask. It says, but even when you do ask, you asking amiss so that you may consume something upon your own lust. Daddy, can I get a video game? Yeah. Daddy, can I eat Chick-fil-A? What we're asking for is so limited, when instead of asking for the thing, you can ask for the understanding of how to make the thing, of how to produce the thing. All right, so all right. If miseducation is the problem, no one hid our history. We have to be willing to admit we stopped going after it. We believed the lie that it wasn't worth going after. That's responsibility. That's accountability. We believed that there was nothing there worth learning. Even while learning about George Washington, we didn't go look for Martin Delany. You understand? Even while learning about Thomas Jefferson, we did not go look for Toussaint Louverture. Even while learning about King of Solomon and all of his wealth and wisdom, we did not go looking for Mansa Musa. When we learned about God, when we learned about people like Alexander the Great and Julius Caesar and gave them credit for conquering the world, we did not go looking for Taharka. Man, so what we have to do, if we can agree that our problem has been miseducation, then celebration is not the answer. Celebration would never resolve our issues with miseducation. The only solution to miseducation is education. No, we can, so again, I'm never eat, man, have a good time, celebrate. But even in the midst of that celebrating, shouldn't we be finding time to educate ourselves? Because there's nothing honorable in being a people who can be so easily lied to. Your history can be hid from you that well. because you don't want to pay attention to detail no more. You don't ever let somebody just hand you your story. Pick up the shovel and dig it up yourself. Arturo Schomburg, one of our greatest philosophers and bibliophiles in the truest sense, wrote an article called "The Negro Digs Up His Past." What that really means is to really understand who you are and what you're capable of. You're not just sitting at a table waiting for somebody to bring it to you. You got to be willing to go get that shovel and dig it up yourself. The moment you come to the conclusion that somebody might have a motive from keeping you from knowing who you are, it becomes your responsibility to do everything you can to turn every stone over until you know exactly who you are. So then you ask yourself, what kind of people celebrate waiting on freedom? Oh, let's think about this. Let's think about this for a moment. Again, this is not an attack on the holiday. It's beautiful. I could talk about the political ramifications of needing something much more necessary. I would talk about how the fact that just a few weeks ago there was a anti-Asian hate bill passed, and after what, a decade of more police violence and vigilante violence against black bodies, only 5 Asian folk died, and the next week the president signed a bill. And now we got so many names saying we won't forget, say their names, that we're running out of breath to say their names. And still no bill, but hey, you got you a holiday. We should compare June 14th. We should compare Juneteenth to July 4th. We should submit ourselves to some type of comparative analysis. We should ask ourselves some type of a question. If we are indeed calling Juneteenth Freedom Day, we should ask ourselves, then what then is the difference between Juneteenth for black folk, for the African American, and July 4th for the American? The difference is the history. The difference is the history. And I'm going to say this as humbly as I can, I say Juneteenth is not something to be celebrated. You don't celebrate waiting for somebody to set you free. That's not what July 4th is. July 4th celebrates this brother by the name of Patrick Henry, who says, "Give me liberty or give me death." Why is America's freedom worth more than black folks' freedom? These are questions we have to entertain ourselves with. We have to engage ourselves with thoroughly, thoughtfully. That America considers freedom something to die for, and black folks celebrate freedom as something to wait for. And then even after 60 years have passed, they'll still be singing the same song, "We shall overcome." Marcus Garvey in 1918 said the Negro is caught between the pot and the frying pan, between the Democrat and the Republican. Malcolm X in 1964 said the Negro is caught between the frying pan and the pot. In 1964, in between the Republican and the Democrat. And here we are, 2021, over 100 years later, still caught in the same place because we're waiting for somebody to give us something that it is our responsibility to give ourselves. Man, that's some good stuff. All right, so I hear you. I hear you. Okay. You're saying we shouldn't celebrate it. What should we do? We should commemorate it. When September 11th happened, you and I were in high school, planes went down. America does not celebrate September 11th. It commemorates it. Every year, we will never forget. All right? I think we're missing an opportunity to grow and to develop as a people and as a community by celebrating what we should be commemorating. I don't think we should celebrate the civil rights movement. Not if we're still marching for now the same things we were marching for then. We are literally still marching for voting rights. We are literally still marching for better education and better jobs. You understand? For my Christians out there, the only time in the Bible I see you encouraged to march is when they were marching around Jericho getting ready to take the city. So if you ain't ready to take nothing, you might as well stay at home. No. So are you saying the civil rights was a failure? I could argue that, but that's not what I'm saying right now. What I'm saying right now is that it is not something to be celebrated. Nothing should be celebrated as victory but victory itself. Boy, that's gold right there. That's gold right there. Nothing should be celebrated as victory but victory itself. I thought to myself the other day, the holiday nights, that's good. Anti-lynching bill, anti-black hate bill, that would be great. Reparations, that would be real nice. But what I want, all I want for Christmas, I don't know what everybody else wants, but all I want for Christmas is the exact same thing I had, and the exact same thing my ancestors had before their lives were interrupted. I would like the freedom to decide for myself if I think capitalism is the best thing since sliced bread. I would like the freedom to determine for myself if I believe that representative democracy is true democracy or not. I should have those rights. I should have the right to determine myself if laws that have unfairly criminalized my people for over 100 years, I should be able to vote myself, and those laws should be able to change instantly. But I live in a country where in Alabama and Georgia, black men can be in prison for the same thing that white men in California and Colorado are becoming billionaires over. And you want me to shout because you gave me a holiday? Oh, no, I'd be just as foolish as the people who think that you actually gave me freedom. So, no, Juneteenth is not something that, in my humble opinion, I'm not telling anybody to change what you do. I'm just sharing some things from my perspective. In my humble opinion, Juneteenth should not be celebrated. It should be commemorated. We should remember the fact that even though we were legally free, we stayed physically bound because we were too willing to stand up, too afraid to stand up. Hold on, think about that. Think about that. Every African American, which at that time were not Americans, understand? Every African who was not a free person of color at the time, in 1863 was legally free, but waited till 1865 for somebody to come in so they didn't have to fight themselves. That's not something that should be honored, beloved. If that was a part of America's history, it would put it in the back halls. You know what I'm saying? It would put it in the back closet. It wouldn't hold that participation trophy out front. What did you do to gain your freedom? I waited. Excuse me? So you waited till they set you free? Well, actually, no. I was free in 1963. I waited till 1865. That's not something that should be celebrated. I don't say that to discredit anybody's history. Truth is truth, and a little bit of leaven leavens the whole lump. Commemorate it. Remember that at a time we were so bound in our minds that we felt that we were powerless to help ourselves. And then ask yourselves, have we really been set free? Or were the shackles only removed because the damage had already been done? The domestication had already taken effect. I had literally opened the gate and you still wouldn't walk out without my permission because I had trained you so well. And so now, while my government is systematically killing your babies in the street, while just random vigilantes decide they want to kill a black person and do so in many times without any type of consequence because I gave you a mixed vice president and a national holiday. Now you say progress has been made. I heard one person once say, the only people who believe that we've come a long way are those who really do not realize how far we've fallen. You must first examine where we were before you can really tell me where we are. Was that good, y'all? All right. So that's Juneteenth. Commemorate, not celebrate. You don't celebrate somebody giving you your freedom. America would never celebrate such a thing. Russia would never celebrate such a thing. Ghana did no such thing. They took their freedom. Zimbabwe did no such thing. They took their freedom. Where freedom is given, as it was in South Africa, then the same racism that persisted then still persists now. That while black people are legally free in South Africa, see, it's getting good. It's trying to phase me out now. While black folk are legally free in South Africa, they own less than 10% of the land. Their land. they own less than 10% of their land because there's something about these power structures and our ability to accept them that says it's okay if you apologize, you don't have to give me my stuff back. I don't know about you, but I want my stuff back, or at least the equivalent value. All right, so what does it have to do with Black Wall Street? Well, in the same way, we kind of have a selective memory about Juneteenth. We do the same thing with Black Wall Street and Malcolm X. So I've been teaching Black Wall Street for over 10 years. It was one of the critical moments in my life was learning about Black Wall Street because I'd already knew about Rosewood and already knew about Durham, North Carolina. So for me, Black Wall Street is in Tulsa, Oklahoma, was just like, oh, so this was a pattern. These are not isolated incidents. Watch this. This is not just crazy white folk in the South. This is a pattern on an American regime at a certain point in its history, right? And so when you get to Black Wall Street, I've been teaching it for 10 years. We still make the same mistake. Right now, people are just starting to learn about it. And so they're like, oh, man. And so the thing we're wanting to get caught up on is the trauma of it. All right? The trauma of it. What do I mean when I say that? Well, how do you feel when someone says, well, these people drop bombs on a whole town? You get upset. You get mad. You get traumatized. And then you start believing stuff like, oh, we can't do nothing because they just gonna bomb it. That's where your mind becomes. Your mind stays there. And then you get together and you celebrate in Black Wall Street. What you celebrating? The fact that it existed at one point, right? Because that's the only standard you need to celebrate for whatever reason. That's how low our standards are. It happened. Let's celebrate it instead of understanding it. Commemorating it is committing it to memory. Committing it to memory through the process of study, through engaging it academically. Black Wall Street didn't end when the bombs dropped. Whoever believes that never read the story. Whoever believes that, as I always teach you guys, anytime somebody say, think about it, they probably haven't what? Thought about it. A lot of the things that we believe, we don't believe because we were lied to. We believe because we didn't go looking for it. We believe because we allow social media to be an acceptable form of education. You read something on a meme, not knowing who wrote it, where it came from, how it came to be, and you say, this is my new truth. And so we say Black Wall Street was destroyed with the bombs, and nothing could be further from the truth. Bombs have never destroyed any people's resolve. Not in any historical moment. Not in any moment in history has bombs stopped anything. You got to have a really, really big bomb to stop something. So no, the bombs didn't stop it. The mobs didn't stop it. The riots didn't stop it. Because after that fateful event where they burned everything down, what do you think those black people who were resilient enough to build a town after surviving slavery, what do you think they did? They rebuilt it. If we're really concerned, then once we realize that, we must ask then what happened to Black Wall Street? Where did it go then? If hold up, you telling me that after this event that we're kind of getting traumatized around now, and we're saying nobody told us about this, we're saying, oh, this didn't exist. Who is, we say they lied. Who is they? Whose responsibility was it to tell you your history? No, when you say they lied, I hope you're talking about your parents. I hope you're talking about your grandma and your granddaddy and your great grandmama and your great granddaddy, because I need us all to understand that it's our responsibility to pass down the information. And the first thing my mind comes is, dang, why my family never talked about this? No, dang, why my grandmama never said nothing about this? Did nobody know? Or did nobody care? And so we have to deal with, no, there are some apathy issues in the black community. We like to get riled up when it's something traumatic and after the fact. But when we are able to come together, organize, mobilize, and create a proactive solution, we are too apathetic to be called together. We just like to be called together when it's trauma. But by exploring the truth of Black Wall Street, we'll see what our issues are. Black Wall Street didn't end with the bombs. Bombs didn't destroy Black Wall Street. Fires didn't destroy Black Wall Street. Macy's destroyed Black Wall Street. Sears destroyed Black Wall Street. And even to say it that way, it's wrong. Your appetite for Macy's destroyed Black Wall Street. Our appetite for JCPenney's and McDonald's and Chick-fil-A and Subway and Taco Bell. I don't know why I'm only saying food places, but our appetite for greener grass and colder ice and a whiter life. Come on now. We weren't trying to keep up with the Joneses. You understand? What killed Black Wall Street is people stopped shopping in Black Wall Street. People stopped going to the hospitals in Black Wall Street because all of a sudden now you could shop at the places where you couldn't. Come on in here, integration. Oh my goodness. We talk about segregation and integration so dishonestly in this country. We talk about it as if it was just a black and white matter that was so fine pointed that every black person wanted integration and every white person wanted segregation. That is such a dishonest way to have that conversation. And it also robs us then of every black business that decided to do business anyway. Every black school that existed because they decided to exist anyway. Every school was not complaining about, well, we're not. I want you to think about this. It is how you can catch a lie. Because people start saying, oh, the textbooks wasn't updated. What? Math hasn't changed in over 300 years. What are you talking about? 2 plus 2 is still 4. You don't need an updated textbook. You need an updated grind. You need an updated resolve. Black Wall Street didn't die with bombs. It died with wanting something that didn't come from your people. You know, there's certain people that only buy certain cars. You go to certain people out and say, no, I'm a Ford man. I'm a Chevy man. You know what they're saying when they say that? I only buy American made. Now, nobody calls them a racist for saying anything like that because it's not racist. It's nationalist. Right? But nobody says anything bad about that. People in Russia, they want Russian things. People in China, they want Chinese things. I was say China. They want Chinese things. People in North Korea, they want North Korean things. The problem with the black person in Africa is that he's forgotten, she's forgotten, they have forgotten how to want things of their own. They haven't had a home of their own for so long. They've been forced to share the scraps with other people for so long that even envisioning their own is a far-stretched dream, even when they're living in it. We can't avoid that. We cannot overlook that it was not necessarily white people who destroyed Black Wall Street, but it was the appetite of black people that destroyed Black Wall Street. It was the apathy of black people that destroyed Black Wall Street. It was the same thing. I watched the documentary. Now I bring us to Malcolm X. I watched the documentary on Malcolm X, and at the very end of this documentary, one of the ladies was talking, and she was just a random lady, somebody who used to, she said, I casually went, right? Throughout the whole documentary, she'd been talking like she was there, like she was gung-ho. And at the end, she's like, looking back, I was casually a part of what was going on. I wasn't a Muslim. I wasn't a part of his association. Like most people know the name Malcolm X, but have never heard of the Organization of African American Unity. I don't understand. That's the organization he started. Most people have heard of Malcolm X, but don't know the Malcolm X grassroots movement. You've heard of Malcolm X, but you don't know of Republic of New Africa, which Betty Shabazz was the second vice president. I'm not understanding. Then what do you really know? You know what you've seen. But this young lady, she says, the day when he died, I cried, and I'm watching her as she's telling the story. She says, I cried because I realized that I was just playing with him. She said, no, I saw, last time I saw him, I told him I was gonna come to the Autobahn on the day that he was assassinated. And you do know that the speech he was gonna give is available. How do we care so much and we ain't even looked at the speech that he was gonna give that day? It's available. We have it in the library. So she said, I told him I was gonna be there. I didn't go. Not because I was doing something important. I just didn't go. I was just out hanging out with my friends. And then I realized something. Though we like to paint this picture of collective engagement, we like to remember the civil rights movement and the Black Power movement as if we were all there. Everybody's grandparent liked to act like they marched with Dr. King. Everybody's grandparents like to act like, no, I was out there in them streets. I was protesting. But were you studying? Were you serving? Were you committed anywhere? And the truth of the matter is, in a large sense, the answer is no. I know we don't like to say that because we feel like, oh, that's negative. No, it's not negative. It's the reality. There are plenty of reasons why it's the reality, but until we're willing to address it as the reality, it's going to continue to be the reality. But a part of that problem lies in our perspective of Malcolm as a whole. The same problems we're making with Juneteenth right now, the same problems we're making with Black Wall Street, we've also done with Malcolm. You ask the average black person, what's the difference between Dr. King and Malcolm X? Most people are going to say one was for peace and one was for violence. And yet you cannot find one speech, not one. I challenge anybody to do so. You cannot find one speech where Malcolm advocates violence. You find plenty of speeches of Dr. King leading his people into violence. So then Dr. King's central theme then is not peace, it is nonviolent confrontation, non-civil disobedience, right? Malcolm then does not stand for violence. You can't find, watch this, not only can you not find one speech where Malcolm advocates violence, you cannot find one incident where Malcolm is involved in violence or where Malcolm is leading anybody into violence. See, these things are allowed to live in our mind space because we're not taking responsibility for learning about our elders and our ancestors. We're taking propaganda as fact, propaganda as program. No, the difference between Martin and Malcolm is not violence or nonviolence. It is civil rights versus political rights. All right? It is, do we stay or do we go? It is divorce versus reconciliation. The difference between Malcolm and Martin is not violence or nonviolence. As a matter of fact, you will find out, if anything, violence and nonviolent conversation was the bridge between Malcolm and Martin. The difference between Malcolm and Martin is ultimately in that space of political power, which of course we see Dr. King shifting to a focus of political power in his last speeches, where he begins to say stuff like, stop buying Coke. When Dr. King says stop buying Coke, what is he saying? Rebuild Black Wall Street. Right? See, we because we have a selective memory and how we understand our history, we say boycott and don't know what the heck we're talking about. Can I teach you something? A boycott is only effective if it is permanent and you're able to replace it. All right? So a boycott, Montgomery boycott, nice. You boycott the bus system. If boycotting the bus system does not result in Black-owned bus systems, it's not an effective boycott. It's a tantrum. I'm withholding this until you treat me better. Right? So every year for the past 30 years, Black folks have decided to boycott something or other, which means you're admitting that somebody has a problem mistreating you. And so what we need to learn how to do is what abused women learn how to do. Boycott that marriage permanently. Sometimes you got to change that last name. All right? So a lot of our misunderstandings, what I would like to encourage everybody to do, no matter what holiday you celebrate, I'm never against any time for our people to come together, have conversations, and uplift each other. But if we know that miseducation, and there's no blame necessary here, if we know that miseducation has been our primary problem, our primary downfall, then re-education is going to be the only solution or the primary solution. Entertainment is in that. Economics are in that. But we can't fix economics with a bunch of people who just trying to get quick rich stuff. We've got to fix our mind. We first got to liberate our minds, so that then when we look at history, we don't look at it as something that is necessarily set in stone, but we look at it as something that is covered in earth that desperately needs to be unveiled. You understand? Juneteenth is not something that we have figured out. And we've got to stop entrusting other people to figure it out for us. We've got to delve into the real reason. For people, and I know this is going to be an unpopular video. I'm already okay with that. I know this makes somebody mad, but for people in this position, for people historically in the position that we've been in, we have to come to a point where we realize we ain't got that much to celebrate for. And so at some point, celebrating this much begins to look irresponsible. And we're never going to give anybody an excuse to treat us the way we've been treated. But what I'm saying is, I'm going to say it in Dr. King's word, who used Ralph Abernathy's words. At some point, we got to stop laughing when ain't nothing funny and stop scratching when nothing's itching. In other words, we got to get down to business. There's so much more work we have to do. I'm not saying America was wrong for making it a holiday. It's an American holiday. It's something for America to celebrate, that parts of this country finally grew a conscience. No, they should celebrate that. It's not something that black people should celebrate. It's something that black people should commemorate, something that they should go to their grave swearing will never happen again. You understand? September 11th affected a small fraction of this country, but a major percentage of this country have made up in their mind that that ish will never happen again. They've made up in their mind that it's never going down like that again. It only affected a small percentage of people in this country. But the majority of Americans said that was such a heinous violation that we will never forget. Right? That's commemoration. Not something to celebrate. Commemoration is something to commit to. They say, no, when we look at Juneteenth, we should look at it with a little sour taste in our mouth. No, Texas, what took you so long? And then we got to look at it. I'm sorry. I know nobody likes to say this stuff because it's not popular, but then we got to look at ourselves. No, we've got to stop honoring life more than freedom. Got to put an end to that. We're raising cowards because of it. We're raising men who hit women because of it. We're raising people who can shoot people who look like them, but can't stop can't stop 6 cops from killing 1 person. We're raising cowards. We're raising people who are mentally lethargic. I don't want to think about that. Man, who got time to think about that? Well, according to the wealth gap, we got nothing but time. Typical white American family pulls in $171,000 a year. Typical black family pulls in $17,000 a year. That is a 90% gap. So when they're talking about the 1% and the 99%, we ain't even in the 99%. We're at the very bottom of that 99%. Because we've allowed ourselves to become the most ultimate consumers. I've often said we treat knowledge like food. Whatever you put in front of me, I'm going to eat. But if I got to hunt it down myself, I'm going to starve. If I don't like it, if I got to grow it with my hands, if I got to go out and kill it myself, or if I don't like the taste, I'm not going to eat it. And none of those are dietary decisions. You see how we use the wrong senses to make decisions? The little bit of weight that I was able to lose, I got to get back to it. But a little bit of weight that I was able to lose, I was able to do so because I realized one crucial thing, that I was not making decisions about food the right way. I was making decisions about food about taste. This tastes good, so I'm going to eat it. That's not what food is for. Food is not for your tongue. Did you know that? Did you know it's only on the tongue for like a few seconds? Food is not designed for the tongue. The tongue just gets to test it. You understand? Before it goes down. Food is made for the body. The body has a way that it operates. So that if I want to make better food decisions, I got to know more about my body. We want to make better decisions for black folk, we got to know more about the body of black folk. And when I say the body, I mean not just the black folk in Alabama, not just the black folk in Texas, not just the black folk in Chicago, not just the black folk in the US. Hey, we got black folk in Canada. We got black folk in Mexico. We got black folk in South America. All the islands black. You can't get around that now. We got black folk in Asia. We got black folk in Europe. Our conversation is going to have to become a collective conversation because our struggle has been a collective struggle. We are going through the same thing and all trying to fight different ways to get out of it. When the only real thing we need to be fighting right now, and it's a bold statement, but it's the truth. The thing that we really need to be fighting right now is our lack of information or our abundance of wrong information. The lack of information, the abundance of wrong information is just as bad as the lack of right information. A little leaven leavens the whole lump. You know, you have to start thinking about things. I read Plato's Republic a few years ago, and I'm through, y'all. I'm through. Plato's Republic a few years ago. And there's this point where they're talking about what stories to raise children up on, right? And so they said, you got these stories of the great heroes and who they go through these things and they get killed, or somebody they loves get killed, and then they're breaking down and they're crying. They're like, "Oh God, why would you do this to me?" And Aristotle is like, "Well, should we tell these stories?" Or Socrates rather saying, "Should we tell these stories?" And then everybody's thinking about it. Everybody gives their opinion, and finally Socrates kind of breaks it down and says, "No, we shouldn't, because if we teach our children these stories, we teach them how to fear. And if we teach our children these stories, we teach them how to lose. If we teach our children these stories, we teach them that getting emotional and not having strategy is acceptable." Ultimately, what Socrates comes to the conclusion of through Plato's eyes is this debate between nature versus nurture. And Plato, or Socrates, concludes rather that nurture has such a profound impact on the society we create. Forget gender roles and all that stuff. Society. Am I the type of person who stands up for my people or not? Am I the type of person who wants to serve my community or not? Babe, you and I are old enough, young enough, where we remember when American schools taught citizenship. You know what I'm saying? Did they still teach citizenship? Citizenship, yeah. You had to go through citizenship. Yeah. It was what who John F. Kennedy said, "That's not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country." And black people are more encouraged to believe that about America than they are their own communities. I don't have a problem with you believing that about America. That's fine. But don't be out of order with it. If you're going to believe that about America, I need you to first believe that about your family. That's not what your family can do for you, but what you can do for your family. And then before you skip over and just go straight to the country, I need you to go down to your community. Ask not what your community can do for you, but what you can do for your community, right? So what's happening to us right now is our communities are being abandoned because we're abandoning them, right? Because we're coming up, we're saying we're not asking not what our communities can do for us. We're asking what our communities can do for us. And once we don't like the answer, we're trying to get out the community as soon as we can. Black people are the only ethnic group on the planet that have something called survivor's remorse, which basically is a load of psychological permission to not care about the people you left behind. To not realize that you and your family, your four and no more, are not just an island, that you are a part of a larger group, right? For you to be able to see that about America and not see that about yourselves, this is all the more reason we need to question why we're celebrating Juneteenth. We don't get the picture. What makes it possible for there to be a 2-year delay in freedom is that the black folk, the slaves themselves, stayed so divided against each other that they didn't help each other out. In other words, black folks said, "Oh, I'm out. I'm good now. Forget them folk in Texas. I got my freedom." We have to deal with that apathy. We got to deal with that selfishness. But I'm just so happy. I just so happen to be graceful enough to believe that apathy is directly rooted to a lack of information. That if we fix the information gaps in our community, that if we take these times not to just celebrate, not to just dance, not to just mock the humanity of our ancestors by showing them just idly waiting by. Oh, thank the Lord Jesus. After 300 years, he's seen mercy on us. God didn't send Pharaoh to set the Israelites free from Egypt. He sent an Israelite. We're the only people in the world that praise our Pharaoh. You know? See, look, if you look in the story, Lincoln is Pharaoh. He relents. The only way we can get through this is if we let him go. We've so praised Pharaoh that we've completely overlooked Moses. So now Moses and the Freedmen's Bureau goes untalked about. Because we want to talk about Lincoln's delayed promise. But the people who actually rebuilt after the Civil War, the people who are responsible for the people who are responsible for public education in this school system, in this nation. There was no public education system prior to Reconstruction. Reconstruction is the time period when because there's some, again, you got to understand the whole history. Every black person in the South wasn't a slave. All right, did you not know? Did you know that? Did y'all know that? Every black person in the South wasn't a slave because the South wasn't always America. Neither was the North. Neither was the West. So there's a lot of irresponsibility when we talk about our history. We say, well, the ancestors got here with Jamestown. Wait a minute. Jamestown is the Britons. What about the Franks? The French, who had claimed a big chunk from Canada all the way down to Florida and called it Louisiana. Much South Carolina, North Carolina, all the way down to Florida, all the way over to Louisiana, all the way up to Canada was one place. And guess what? Those people had slaves too. What about the Spanish? Who comes to La Florida? These people had slaves too. And then they leave. And then they emancipate their slaves. This is how you get St. Augustine, Florida. Emancipate their slaves, do a lot better job at it than Lincoln did. They emancipate their slaves. As a matter of fact, much of what we know about the Underground Railroad is so reversed. Wasn't nobody enslaved in Maryland trying to get to Delaware or Canada when South Carolina was not American territory. It was free land. So why would I run 300 miles when I just go 25 miles down the road to freedom land? Right? So there's a history here. But then you also cannot ignore the history of all of these black folks who were in the islands prior to any European contact. Nor can you ignore the history of the black folks who were in the Americas, South and North, cold and hot, as we've always been. Not saying we were the only other people here. There's always been other people, but you ain't about to write us out. Not about to write us out. My great-great-great-grandmother was here on Alabama land before Alabama was a state. Alabama on my property. What am I ain't land on Plymouth Rock. Plymouth Rock landed on me. I didn't choose Alabama. Alabama chose me. It chose my land. All right, so you get the point. The point is, they that hunger and thirst after righteousness, and righteousness class is right understanding. Okay? Righteousness is right understanding. They say, well, righteousness is right living. No. You can't live right if you can't understand right. So just go straight to the source. Righteousness is right understanding. And so if you hunger and thirst after righteousness, after that right understanding, you'll be filled. Filled with what? Right understanding. Because the thing you're going to realize is black folk problem is not that we don't have enough money. It's not the problem. It's not the problem. It's not even that we don't have enough unity. It's not the problem. These are symptoms, not problem. It's not that we have too many babies. It's not that we don't have enough fathers. There's 7 women to every man on this planet right now, or at least it was about 15 years ago. So the point is, it's always going to be a time when there's not enough fathers until that statistic changes. These are scare tactics. These are not the problem. What's the problem is the wrong information. What's the problem is we don't know enough. What's the problem is that our hearts haven't been properly broken with the right information. We ain't cried enough. We ain't looked across the aisle at our brothers and sisters in Haiti and cried with them. We ain't cried with Jamaica. And had we listened to Malcolm, we would have. Had we truly understood Dr. King, we would have. But because we've reduced our education and our learning to sound bites that sound tight. I have a dream. Well, he was living after that. He didn't have a dream and die. Not the last speech he gave. But we treat it as if it's the only one he gave. That's the sign of somebody not knowing. You know, you ever been talking to somebody and you say, hey, you seen this movie? And they were like, yeah, I saw this movie. And the more you talk about the movie, you realize they only know one part in the movie. And you be like, no, wait a minute. That part was in the trailer. Did you see the movie or not? And that's how we've been treating our past. We've been treating it as if we know it when we know we only watched the trailer. We didn't watch the movie. You heard the clip. One day, let freedom ring, let freedom ring. You know, you heard the clip, not studied the man. You don't know that he was so unpopular in his own convention that when he ran for president, there was literally a fight and somebody died. That's how serious it was. He was so unpopular within his own convention. I don't say that to discredit him. I say that because that's a part of his story. We don't know who he is. You know who he is. You know, I used to, when I pastored a little church called Kingdom Central, a lot of people would go to church. People like, oh, people smoking, blah, blah, blah. And then these same people would praise Dr. King. And I'm like, you do know he was on that balcony to take a smoke break, right? And I realized how much of our history we do not know because we have deified people. Everybody that dies become the best thing since sliced bread. Can't say nothing wrong about it. Tupac dies at 25 and we hail him the greatest rapper alive. No, you missed it. Tupac died at 25 and we hail him the greatest rapper alive. He dead though. He died at 25. We don't know who he'd become. And as much as we loved his potential, to do that would be to discredit everybody that lived. You understand? This is what we've done. So when Martin died, guess what? Fell apart. Malcolm died, guess what? Fell apart. Huey decided, I'm tired of this revolutionary life. Guess what? It fell apart. Why? Because we've just gotten comfortable with knowing the half-truth. We get comfortable just going off your passion. You know, no, Durante real passionate, so I'm just riding off of his. No, don't ride off my passion. You need to figure out why this is passionate for you. You need to know why this is important to you. I said I'm done. I was supposed to be done like 15 minutes ago. Y'all have any questions before I close out? Real question. What's the question? Mm-hmm. What did he do? Well, okay, there's President Abraham Lincoln. I talked about Washington. George Washington, he was the first president of the United States. And again, that kind of takes us to this other thing, this idea that we have in the black community that social change takes forever. That's not historically true. It's not historically true. Social change, revolution has never taken all day or all night. It didn't take all day and all night for President George Washington. He was alive when the battle began. He was president when the battle ended. And he happens to be, I believe, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, the longest serving president of U.S. history, which means he lived a long time, which means revolution was a very short time. But we come to conclusions that we've never studied. So we say, watch this. It may not happen in my lifetime. It may happen in the next generation. I want to help everybody with what that is. That's called being scared. That's called being a coward. And watch this. It's called being the worst kind of coward. Because you say, I'm too scared to fight the battle. Maybe my kids will fight it for me. That's what you're saying. And if you say, well, no, not the next generation, next generation. Oh, okay, let me fix that. I'm too scared to fight this battle, so I'm going to let my grandchildren fight it for me. And then the worst part about that is, it's not just that I'm going to let my grandkids fight it for me. It's also, I'm going to let my kids suffer through it until my grandkids fight it. You see what I'm saying? The people who did the Cuban thing, they made up in their minds that the next generation is more important than the comfort of this generation. You know, you can't create change while wanting to hold on to the comfortable things about what's holding you down. You got to be willing to cast it all off. We can do it now. Well, Malcolm came to the conclusion is like, hey, black people, you got the same right as every other people in this world. Exercise it. America didn't wait for Britain to say, yeah, you can be an independent nation. These Americans who were rightfully Britons made up in their minds, we don't want to be connected no more. We don't like the way you treat us. We don't like your taxes. So we want a divorce. That's reasonable to me. Reasonable to me. But yeah, so any more questions? All right, that's good. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you guys so much for tuning in, for being a part of this. Really, not this time. Should have had a question. Should have had a question. All right, love you guys. Thank you for tuning in. Until next time, keep rising, man. Love y'all.